We had a joint venture with a local sheikh from Ajman. He started misbehaving and taking money from our account when it wasn't due, close to 12 million dirhams, which at the time was about £2 million.
Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the IFG podcast. With me I have the wonderful CEO of Gridizen, Kamran Mahmood, and we're going to talk about, Kamran, your roller coaster journey through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, from running, I think it was like a 50-60 man business at one point, right?
It was nearly 200.
Oh my God.
Assalamu alaikum first. Thank you for inviting me.
No, jazakallah khair. I like it. And then it collapsed, and then things went wrong, and then you're now on the way up again. It's like the Pepsi Max, where it goes up and down. But before we get into all of that, I want you to tell me a little bit about this double PhD Canadian man who was a tenant of yours.
So this is just when I'd left the city. I decided to do my lettings and management by myself. I had recruited someone very experienced. We moved this man in. He was very, very sort of qualified, as you've mentioned. And he was saying he was waiting for grant funding for a new fisheries business he was setting up in the Docklands.
He was 70 years of age.
He was at least 70.
Oh, my God, right.
And I got sucked into his lovely personality and his mannerisms. And back in those days, I used to meet the tenants, which I don't do anymore, because that just creates complications in terms of emotional attachment. So he would make excuse after excuse why his grant funding hasn't come through and why he can't receive rent. If you fast forward 12 months, without 12 months without receiving rent, I had to unfortunately start legal proceedings on him, and he tried every trick in the book. So delaying legal proceedings, turn up to court one day saying he doesn't have a solicitor, delaying another saying he doesn't like his new solicitor or barrister. So the whole process probably ended up taking 18 months, to a point where when we were finally in court, the judge realized that he had forged documents.
So he wasn't a double PhD?
Well, no, he was, I don't know if he was a double PhD, he may have forged that as well, but he had forged his tenancy agreement, because he tried to say that he had a different agreement to ours, but his was dated after legal proceedings had started.
Oh, right.
And the judge said that's just not possible. So I think the judge got sucked into his personality as well.
Yeah.
And gave him a day to correct his story. So the following day he admitted guilt, and we won the case there and there. And then I remember the old chap, bless him, he started saying, can he have more time? And I'd got to the end of my 18 months without rent in a property when we were just starting a business was pretty tough.
Yeah.
But I think that just taught me just to not be emotionally attached with tenants and treat them as someone living in your property that's meant to pay you rent. And over the years, we've been flexible, especially over COVID. We've had to give people discounts and allow them not to pay rent for a while they're getting back on their feet. So we've been flexible, but not as flexible as we were with, I've just remembered his name, Dr. Darcy.
Oh, right. Fantastic. That was a brilliant name as well. Yeah. Very nice name.
What's the program? Was it Wuthering Heights?
No, Pride and Prejudice, right?
Pride and Prejudice, there you go.
Darcy, yeah.
Yes. So not quite the same. So this guy was, I think, 5'4".
Oh, wow, all right. Okay, fine. And so, Kamran, the other fascinating thing that we were just talking about was, at the age of 11, you were not in after school. You wouldn't just be going home and, I don't know, having your Weetabix. I don't know why you would have Weetabix after school. But anyway, you weren't just chilling out.
Yeah.
You were in houses, gutting them and fitting kitchens. Didn't look like it, but you were...
Well, no one believes that anymore. Yeah. So as we've discussed, my father passed away when we were quite young. Our mother was 36, widowed with 4 children under the age of 12. Wow. We lived in one room for 2 years because we couldn't afford to heat the house.
And so where were you based?
So I was born in Pakistan. We emigrated in 1968. And we, at the time, my father bought a house in 1977 from auction in Wimbledon. And then he passed away in 1978. And then unfortunately there was an unscrupulous joint venture partner my father had who suggested my father was an employee and not a partner. So for 2 years, that went through legals and probate while we lived in one room, and friends of the family gave us groceries and helped us. And my mum, she didn't learn to speak English in the 10 years that she was in the UK, and didn't really learn any major skills. So it was quite a tough time. And then when money was received from probate, a friend of my father's advised my mum to continue doing what my father had started doing, which was going to auctions, buying property and refurbishing them. So if you imagine in the early 80s, a lady in property was very, very rare. A lady turning up to auctions was even rarer. And a lady turning up to auctions in shalwar kameez, not speak English, was, I mean, she's one in millions, I would suggest. So, there's all these women who are claimed to be ambassadors for women in construction or women in property. I think my mother was a real pioneer in this. And through that process, because of my mum's English skills and sort of not understanding stuff, my older brother did much more than I did. He's 3 years my older, and bless him, he bunked off school to go to house auctions, bank manager meetings, translating loan documents, translating legal agreements. And then I remember...
At the age of what was this?
He was 13, 14.
Wow.
I remember my mother being called into school when the school found out my brother was missing school, and he was coming up to O-levels. So we just played swapsies. So he started going to school more, and I started missing school, turning up to these meetings. Again, far less than Haroon, my brother, did. But I remember going to bank manager meetings and translating loan contracts. But then at the same time, evenings, weekends, holidays, my brother and I with my mother were gutting flats and going to B&Q and buying flat packs. So at one stage, Haroon and I had a very grandiose nickname for ourselves. We were the flat pack kings. So we learned how to build kitchens very, very quickly.
And you just taught this to yourself? How did you learn this stuff?
Just on the job. One of the main jobs was actually gutting the flats. And gutting flats doesn't take any finesse. You have a big hammer and you have gloves and a mask, and you just take things down. The hard thing was getting steamers and taking the wallpaper down off the walls. I remember the pain my arms were in, taking the sort of cement off the polystyrene tiles off the ceilings. So that was ongoing, and that was at the same time as going to madrasa as well. So my mum was insistent that straight after school he was going to madrasa and then going to sites and weekends, etc. And then by the age of 15, I was doing my 15, 16, I was doing my O-levels, and during that phase I said to my mother, I think I should not do A-levels and just do this full time with you, and we'll be able to be much more productive. And she arranged for my elder brother to just give me a really good beating.
Oh, really?
And at the time I was obviously physically and mentally sort of traumatized. But in hindsight, I say to people now, it was the best beating of my life. It really got me focused on my education. My mum made it clear she wasn't working the way she was and sacrificing what she did. Like many, many families that immigrants and of that sort of background that feel that education is the real sort of social mobility platform that everyone needs. So I knuckled down, did my A-levels, went to university, got a mathematics degree.
Where did you study?
Went to Queen Mary College, and really enjoyed my time there. I perhaps didn't study as much as my mum thinks I did. I was lucky enough to meet my wife at university. And then I got into investment banking and qualified as an accountant. So from that point, I probably studied another 10 years. To become an ACCA. And I mean, for my final exams for ACCA and the sitting before that, I was married and had a son. So I was actually working full time and doing 4 evening classes.
Oh no.
And then sitting my exams.
What did you do in the city?
I worked on the trading floor in terms of initially P&L reporting. I don't know if many of your viewers remember back to Nick Leeson.
Yeah.
Nick Leeson bought down Barings Bank. So there was a massive rush while I had just started in the city to move to risk management And because of my analytical mathematics background, I was asked to move into risk management. So I, by the age of 27, became head of the interest rate derivatives risk desk at Industrial Bank of Japan, just through, understanding numbers.
Mm-hmm. And then what led you to get into the property game, or were you always in the property space?
We were always in the property space. However, when my older brother started work and I started work, we stopped the buying in auctions and trading because it was quite labor intensive.
What was he doing? Was he in the city as well?
No, he was a management consultant. He started at, back then it was Anderson's, converted to Anderson Consulting. He probably left before it became Accenture.
Right.
And then moved to Mars. Mars in terms of their management trainee program. And then he got moved to Saudi in 1996.
Right.
Which is around the time that he and I discussed starting to buy in Canary Wharf off plan. So we bought off plan in 1996. So I know some people think this is revolutionary, buying off plan and trading. We were trading off plan nearly 30 years ago.
Wow. And
some people, when I explained to them the mathematics of the implied leveraged opportunities, they thought that I was completely mad. So, I mean, we traded off plan 96, 97, yeah.
And when did you decide to go full time? What was the business called?
The business we incorporated in 98, it was called MINC, M-I-N-C, which is Mahmood Incorporated, which is our family name.
I see.
And I recruited that lettings person I spoke to you about. She used to be head of lettings and management at Knight Frank in Canary Wharf. Recruited her in 98. I left in 2000. I wasn't allowed to leave. I actually resigned. But because my job was so specialist, I wasn't allowed to leave until Y2K was over.
Right.
So there was all this thing about the whole world's going to shut down because our computers aren't going to work. And I had to do all these valuation methods and...
was it like a serious risk?
It felt like a serious risk, but we got up the next morning and it was another day.
The computers were perfectly fine.
But life has demonstrated to me in whichever field, whatever sector I've been working in, there's a challenge of the day that feels really imminent.
Yeah.
And so if you fast forward to today, we're in a cost of living crisis, interest rates are higher, business is challenging. However, this is the third or fourth cycle I've lived through firsthand. And I know in 18 months it'll be different. So you just got to hold on and you got to plan for that. So
tell us, Kamran, before we go ahead, I need to know what's going to happen in 18 months.
18 months time, interest rates will be down, inflation will be down, and we'll be wondering what the big fuss is about. And the market will
You heard it here first, guys.
There'll still be
Where should they be buying? Where should the people be buying? What should they be doing?
They should be buying by doing their due diligence and understanding their own capital sort of requirements and risk parameters. Some people with £50 are prepared to bet £50 on an investment. Some people with 5 million won't bet anything. So they've got to understand their psychology before they start investing anything.
Yeah. If you do have £5 million, then Curate Capital is a place to come.
And I can vouch for that.
All right, so you set up Mink. You've got on your first hire.
Yeah.
And you're doing it with your brother as well, or he was kind of...
So he was much more attached to his salary than I was, and he was more risk averse. So I've had a risk appetite that isn't probably normal for most people, especially when you consider I come from a risk management background and I'm an accountant. People don't actually believe that that's my background and training. But I think that background and training has actually helped me to assess the risks and ultimately back myself. And similar to when you made the transition from a salary to a business, you assess the risks and you plunged in effectively. So my brother didn't join the business probably for a couple of years until we had increased our income to a point where he still took a salary drop like I did, but it wasn't as big a drop as I took when I joined. So we both sacrificed a lot in the early years to be able to grow the business.
And what was the business, and how did what did you guys do?
So we initially thought we were just going to invest our own money. We were going to trade and continue to grow that. Within a few months of leaving banking, people wanted to know why I would leave such a secure career, good bonuses, good salary, good package into that. And people wanted to pay for advice or us for manage their money. So probably by 2002, we were managing third-party funds in small sort of consortium deals where we were buying 40, 50 units off plan and trading them. So by 2005, we were a full services business. I think we actually introduced the term property wealth management back in 2003, 2004. We were presenting at the Property Investor Show at Excel. We were having stands at the Global Property Investor Show. I went to Chicago, I went to Hong Kong, presented in Dubai. So, as I said, by 2005, we had a furnishings business, we had a lettings and management business, sales, marketing, asset management, property management, development. The whole thing under real estate, especially residential, we did it.
Amazing. And how was the growth journey? How did it feel like at the time?
It was just holding on for dear life. We were growing so quickly, and we didn't actually have the structured training. Haroon had a lot more training than I did in terms of growing and managing a business, and his input was really vital to manage that growth. But if you look back at it, any money we made, we just reinvested into the business. And it took us probably to the mid-2000s to get back to the salaries that we were on in the late 1990s, just through growth. So by 2007, we had an office in Johannesburg, an office in Dubai, office in London, and then we had associate offices in Tokyo, KL, Hong Kong, and Singapore. So 2005, 6, and 7, I was on a plane half the time.
And you had kids and you had a family at this point?
Yeah, and I think that it's a discussion many families have and many people have, is when's the right time to have children, when's the right time to have a family. If you look at where I am now, I'm blessed that I have 2 grown children that I can spend time with and see their own sort of professional journey starting and how they progress through education. In their earlier lives, I wasn't around much, very committed to the business, perhaps too much so at times.
What kind of hours were you doing?
Every hour. Weekends, evenings, when I needed to be away. Sometimes I'd get a call that I needed to be in Dubai in 48 hours. I'd drop everything and get on a plane. Going to Johannesburg every 6 weeks is a 12, 13-hour flight. Going to Tokyo is a 12, 13-hour flight. So,
and what were you doing out there? I mean, Johannesburg, you had I think a sales team, right?
We had a sales team. Lots of people to this day want to get money out of South Africa because of the political and economic uncertainty. Yeah. Tokyo, again, was a sales outlet. Lots of expats who were working there. We got the right partners who were wealth managers, managed lots of money into your standard stock market, sort of pension fund investments. But they were really interested in real estate as well. So we managed funds there. And again, the same, slightly different. So the guys in Tokyo actually invested in our consortium deals, whereas the guys in KL, Tokyo, Hong Kong, they were real traders and buyers. They wanted to buy units rather than invest in consortiums.
Right, interesting. And so what would you say is like that was the bread and butter of your business?
The bread and butter was trading off plan. We built up a reputation with the developers there. So initially our Dubai office was selling to expats in Dubai, in the UAE, London properties. But then when the property boom started in 2002, 2003, we were selling Dubai properties globally as well. So our bread and butter was buying off plan, packaging it up with a furnishings pack and a rental guarantee, and then selling that as a package. So we gave people peace of mind. So it was we introduced a property one-stop shop, property wealth management. Yeah. So it was all packaged up, where if you bought from us, you didn't have to speak to anybody else. We would furnish it, we would rent it, we would manage it. You'd get your rental regularly. So we built reputations with the big developers here as well as the big developers in Dubai.
And how big was the team at this point?
In 2008, we were looking for offices to expand in Dubai and in London. I think in total we had probably 180, 190 people.
Wow.
a large number of those were, I forgot to mention, we actually ran service departments. So back in 2003, 2004, I think we were the third largest service department operator in London. And we were the first service department operator in Dubai Marina for the first 6 blocks that they built there.
Right.
So we had about 100 units there. So as I'm sure you're aware, service departments are very, very operational. So daily cleaning, check-in, check-out, maintenance, etc. So that took a large amount of workforce.
And where did the wheels start coming off?
Lehman Brothers. I remember it vividly. We had a transaction going on where someone quite high profile in Dubai wanted to buy into our business. We were partway through the legal process when Lehman Brothers got announced. So that transaction got cancelled. However, Sheikh Mohammed did a wonderful PR process saying Dubai's in a bubble and Dubai is going to carry on and it's not going to be affected. So we were starting to wind down and slow down operations in the UK. Even the service department business was hit because people just weren't traveling for business anymore. And then Cityscape, October 2008 happened in Dubai and no one turned up. And overnight property prices dropped by nearly 50%.
So what was Cityscape? Some kind of big event?
Cityscape is a brand for property exhibitions.
Right.
So Dubai Cityscape built up a reputation as the largest global property exhibition.
Right.
So people from US, Turkey, UK, anywhere would actually want to exhibit there.
Wow.
I recently attended Cityscape in Riyadh actually, which was massive and very, very similar.
Interesting. Is there ways to actually invest in Riyadh? It's a side point, I know, but...
They're opening up avenues.
But they've been saying that for years.
I think there's a lot more intent now, as I'm sure you've seen.
Yeah.
So the market's very, very different to 5 years ago.
Yeah. You think there's going to be a bit of a bubble? I mean, it has to be, right? People are interested in buying in Saudi.
I think people are interested in buying in Saudi. I think they'll be more interested in Saudi than Dubai, purely for the Islamic investment nature.
Makkah, Medina.
Firstly, but secondly, the sort of local macroeconomics is demanding more housing for the locals. So if you look, it's got the largest youth population in the world. So over 60% are under the age of 25. So they've got a real housing crisis themselves. So they've got to build housing, but they are similar to the UK, they've got to build affordable housing. So there's some amazing mega projects going on in Dubai, in Saudi. I'm not sure how many of them are going to be affordable for that youth population growing up.
Yeah. So coming back to the story, so Cityscape, Dubai happened 2008.
Yeah.
It was dead. People got spooked. And then what happened?
I think it was 13th November 2008. I walked into a room and made 40 people redundant reading off a sheet.
Oh my God. So hang on. Let's rewind. What's the thought process? What happened?
The thought process is, oh my God, this is going to be really, really difficult.
When did you find that out? When did that realization?
The realization for London was already happening March, April time, because sales had stopped, lending had stopped, lending had dried up, so sales had stopped. People's confidence in the lending market is required for sales to happen. So if you look at the current market, because interest rates are so high and lenders are changing their products all the time, sales have just disappeared at this moment in time. So
and the bread and butter of your business was brokerage and sales and also asset management, right?
Yeah. So the asset management was continuing. However, the service department had dried up. So we had fixed rents to pay our landlords, and we couldn't even pay the fixed rents. Something in the asset management, we were the first organization to launch a sharia-compliant service departments fund in 2007. So we raised £100 million from Kuwait to buy rundown hotels in London and convert them into service departments. So get planning, hire the contractors and convert those buildings. So we still had that asset management income, but that asset management income ultimately dried up by 2009, 2010, because the bank who had invested was experiencing a credit crisis themselves.
No, right.
So they had to reposition the assets. So against our advice, they ended up selling those assets at the worst possible time.
Right.
So that dried up as well.
Okay. So 2008, you could sense that this is not going well.
Yeah.
And kind of most of it was out of your control, really.
Pretty much all of it. So the people we retained were focused on the asset management side and keeping the service departments ticking over.
Yeah.
So we turned around the service departments by the first half of 2009, where people started traveling at much lower rates, but we could cover costs.
And so let's rewind back to November the 13th, 2008. So what was it? How did you plan for that? Because I know that must not be easy to do.
No. And if you understand my personality, people is everything.
Yeah, I know you would not like that.
Looking after people. So the person I recruited in 1998 was still there in 2008. The people I recruited in 2001, 2002 were still there in 2008. I went to people's weddings, their children's christenings, etc., etc. So I got to know their families. So before that happened, the senior executive agreed to take big salary cuts so we could carry on paying staff. And then month after month, that became harder and harder. So we actually hired business coaches to guide us on the best way to navigate through that, because we still had revenue through the asset management. We had the opportunity through the service departments business, and we had a good reputation in what we had built up in Dubai and London. So these guys came in, they did one-to-one interviews, they reviewed the business. It was an additional cost that we didn't really have, but we thought it was really critical, and they advised us on how to restructure. They got legal advice for us on how to do it. So even though I had very, very personal relationship with a lot of those people in that room, I was told not to make eye contact, read off the sheet and walk out. Don't say sorry, don't say anything apart from what's off that sheet. When I walked in, it felt like my heart rate was going at 180 and I was shaking, and it was really emotional.
And what was it? It was like they knew that there was like a meeting that was going to happen. Like, how did they turn up?
They knew stuff was going on. One or two may have known this was going to happen, but majority didn't.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we had to effectively ask people to leave there and then. And one or two people emailed out to our client database saying Mink is closing, etc., which made it much harder to manage our customers and investors, etc., at a different stage. But I understand why that happened. And one of the deep regrets I have is some of those really personal relationships that, they were very, very close to me, I haven't spoken to since. They haven't understood the journey that I went on and how I went through that. And they experienced something really, really difficult themselves, which I will still probably regret.
Yeah. I mean, that's just, the way business is, isn't it? Sometimes like you can't, and I feel like when we're in the thick of it, it's hard to, disentangle the two things. But it's not a personal judgment on those people. It's nothing to do with them, really. In fact.
But if you something I've learned over the years is you've got to try to understand other people's perspective to make sure your behavior and communication is as good as it can be. And for that particular person, they've got rent to pay or mortgage to pay or bills, or they've got children, etc. So they're going to go through a tough time themselves.
Yeah.
So I can't be a priority for them to manage me and if I feel good or bad about it.
Yeah, I get it. And do you think that was it anywhere that you could learn that differently? Do you think, or do you think it's just a tough thing?
I should have done it earlier.
You think you should have done it earlier?
So we were very. I've been told to stop saying lucky. I was going to say we were very lucky. We worked very hard to get where we were. So our non-exec chairman at the time was someone very, very high profile and experienced. He used to be the global chief operating officer for Hilton Hotels. He was the global CEO for M&C Hotels. He actually listed them on the stock market. So very, very experienced, very knowledgeable, loved the person. And his advice to me was make the first cut the deepest.
Yeah.
And the mistake we made is we took too long. We thought the market would change. I didn't take his advice, held on too long, and then didn't make enough people redundant quickly enough.
So that 40 wasn't enough?
That 40 wasn't enough. And we should have done it faster in Dubai as well. And we could have sustained a bit more.
Yeah. Okay. And so then what happened? So now you're in this new world. Eventually the asset management stuff kind of fizzles as well. So where did the shift happen? Like when did Mink go into the
we thought we'd weathered the storm. We had a joint venture with a local sheikh from Ajman, who, unbeknown to us, was going through a credit crisis himself. And he started misbehaving and taking money from our account when it wasn't due. And when we started a legal battle against him, we were advised not to pursue it because of his seniority.
Right.
That ultimately closed our business because he took close to 12 million dirhams,
wow,
which at the time was about £2 million. And we still saw ourselves as a small family business. So ultimately, our life savings, our working capital went to settle with him, even though he wasn't due it. And that ultimately crippled our business.
Yeah.
That was 2010. By 2012, I was looking for a job.
Wow. So like the lessons that I've kind of learned from that are, if you're going through a tough spot, especially out of your control, you should adjust quick. Tighten the drawstrings quicker, cut deeper, and then the second interesting thing is access to bank accounts and money.
Yep.
I don't know if that
access to bank account is sometimes out of your control. Yeah, so you may not have the working capital or the capital to sustain yourself. So the piece of advice I would give for anyone going through a tough time at the moment is act faster, as you've just said. Secondly, ask for help. So what I didn't do enough back then is speak to people that I was close to or could have helped, because there was a certain pride that I felt I had that would make me look bad. And in hindsight, now when I speak to some of those people, they said they should have asked. Now, whether they would have helped or not is a different matter.
Yeah.
But what I've learned over the years is I've been pleasantly surprised by the people who have helped me when I've least expected. And then the second is to understand that the situation you're in will not be the situation you're in 2 years' time. So if you can pick your head up and look further down the road while managing the circumstances you're in today, you need to be prepared to where you're going to be in 2 years' time.
Yeah, makes sense.
So have faith that your circumstances will change and work hard to instigate that change and ask for help for it. Even the advice John Wilson, our chairman, gave, if you can get advice like that and try to act upon it.
And Kamran, what happened after 2012 then?
2012, a friend of mine who used to be a senior banker at one of the Irish banks that collapsed asked me to help one of his friends set up a service department business in London. They were one of the largest, if not the largest, operator in Denmark. So I got a role to set up their business and launch their service department business from scratch in London. That went on for a couple of years. And then in a couple of years, I got asked by a developer to set up a service department brand for them. So I set up another service department brand, launched that. That lasted a couple of years. And then through that, I managed to do a couple of property transactions and started to do property trading again, going back to my roots from the mid-90s. Buying a one-bedroom flat, refurbishing it, selling it, buying it at an auction, refurbishing it, selling it. And that started growing. And then I decided to go for it by myself. So I grew that business from a one-bedroom flat to a two-bedroom flat to converting a house into 3 flats to buying land and getting planning for 15 flats. And during that journey, I got asked by the British Hospitality Association to set up their private rented sector committee. So I was lucky or blessed enough to chair a national committee for build to rent, which was just about to become institutionalized. So institutional money was coming into the build-to-rent PRS sector. And I was able to be on a committee with some extremely knowledgeable and talented people who knew much more than I did about rentals, build-to-rent, construction, design, operations, etc. And that's where my current business's idea really started to flourish. So through those committees, it became clear that there's a real weak link in operational management of rental and the technologies that exists for operational management. So Gridizen, the company that we have now, it initially was focused on big build-to-rent blocks. It's since pivoted a number of times to a point where we have users who have 2 properties and want to manage it themselves, to a landlord with over 800 properties. And we've got other sort of add-ons to that where we provide services for the social housing sector. We're first to market for an ESG report, which is very, very topical. But the mistake, again, I made was trying to run 2 businesses concurrently. So currently we're actually going through the process of winding down our property development business and purely focusing on Gridizen, where we're getting more and more users and getting more and more traction. And through the sort of pivots and changes we've made over the last 18 months, we're, God willing, going to expand into the GCC.
Alhamdulillah. So, I mean, that'll be sad to leave behind the property development side, but it has to be done.
It has to be done. I think I'll keep my toe in it in terms of, I get a number of people asking for advice. So, you know, where I was saying we're always asked for help. I like to think where I can, I'll be able to help and keep my sort of finger on the pulse, as it were. I think running a property development business operationally and running a software development business operationally that has global aspirations, running the 2 at the same time was misjudged by me.
It's too much.
Yeah.
And what's the scale of the property development stuff that you're doing at the moment? Is it you have full-time people in there, or like?
No, so we really are winding that down. We have 2 developments left. One development we've entered a joint venture. So that joint venture partner, a really bright, capable young team who are managing the build, managing the sales. Well, I have a weekly phone call and a monthly review with them. So it's working really, really well. The other property, we're just exploring the planning side and seeing the best way to do that. And we may sell as is, or just enter into joint venture for someone to get planning and then sell after that. So sense. It really is, no one's full-time anymore. My co-founder and business partner who worked with me at Mink and Mink Apartments and Mink Properties, Lady Eve Laws, she is 100% on Gridizen. She used to be in charge of the construction side. So she was a global ambassador for women in construction.
Wow.
So she's 5'3", used to turn up on site with a hard hat and boots with these 6'2", 6'4" men who are trying to intimidate her.
And Kamran, so with Gridizen, any landlord really, small to large, they can take advantage of that, right?
Absolutely.
And so what is the website? Gridizen.co.uk or?
Absolutely. So Gridizen, the term, a lot of people ask where that come from. I probably paid a bit too much for the branding and design, so I actually paid for a branding company to go through names, colors, positioning, etc. So Gridizen comes from citizen of the grid. So it's a physical grid, it's a technology grid, and meshing it all together. Because we're all living in a very involved society where we're expecting Wi-Fi everywhere, but we're expecting buildings to work as well. So that's where Gridizen comes from, and it is gridizen.co.uk. And people can register there. We've got a free trial. And it's through, listen, I was collecting rent in my late teens with a little card and signing it off. So this is before 1982. And AST is coming into action. So I've been through the whole cycle. So Gridizen actually is a lot of our experiences of rental management, as well as buying off plan and the documentation needed. And now, as I'm sure lots of people will be aware, the amount of compliance needed For rentals in the UK, I think you need 7 or 8 different pieces of documentation to be legally allowed to rent, from your health and safety, gas, electricity, fire alarms, to your landlord registration, HMO licensing, etc. So we've just made that a lot simpler, we think.
Makes a lot of sense. Kamran, I'm sure we could talk for hours, but I wanted to really get your thoughts before we wrapped up around your experience with Islamic finance and the Islamic finance industry. What's your hot take?
Let's get a hurry up. It's getting boring having the same conversations. I tried to do something really creative in 2007 in terms of the sharia-compliant fund, which we had designed because the asset class is such. We could have created ISAs and SIPs from that because the market changed. We weren't able to do that. But if you look, there's hardly anyone, if anyone at all, who's actually progressed to make household products for a captive market. I think we've got 2 million Muslims in the UK, but if you look at the Muslims globally, and the UK property market is still seen as a safe haven globally. So why are people from Malaysia and Singapore and South Africa investing in London? Because it has a reputation for stability. I was, again, lucky enough to speak at Islamic Finance conferences in 2009, 2010. And the conversations having then, where people were saying Islamic finance hasn't moved on and it isn't a household product yet, and it's still too expensive compared to traditional products, we're still having now. And the intellect we have, the capital available to us, it's got to be simpler. And we need to understand our product and what we create needs to be available for everybody. Let's stop thinking that if we make it good for Muslims, that's enough. A real benchmark for us, it should be good for everybody. So if you look at the Best Buy fixed term deposits, over 80% of those taking them up are non-Muslim while they're in Sharia compliant institutions. Now, why are over 80% taking those up? Because it's a good, competitive, commercial product. And I think that's why I'm excited about IFG and Curate, because it is trying to break down those barriers. And I just think we just need to do a lot more of it, and we need to do more in size, more in product, and just do it faster. Yeah.
As you were speaking, I was daydreaming about this kind of, you get like these modern black with like a little white light, backlight, and there's like a really modern design. It's just Curate Capital on the tube. And and I was thinking in my head, like, financial promotions regulations, what would I be able to get away with? And it just says real estate, fixed income, venture capital. That's kind of it.
Everything. But if you look at your own ability and your own experience, again, I've been blessed to meet some really, really bright, capable people across all spectrums, but also in Islamic banking and in Islamic structuring. The lawyers that I've met in Islamic structuring, they're more than capable enough to navigate through the regulatory sort of mire of the licensing you need and the process. I'm just surprised and disappointed. So I was invited to speak at a conference in Bahrain in 2018. Same people, sponsoring the same type of event, talking the same thing. I went for the first morning and then spent 4 days with my cousin. I just didn't want to be.
I know what you mean.
And it's got to get better. And I know that sounds hypercritical, but if you work with me and if you speak to people around me, I'm always critical of myself before I'm critical of others. How do we get better?
Agreed.
How do we make it's our responsibilities. No one else is going to do it.
Agreed. Kamran, final question. Property market. Where's it going? What's happening?
It's another cycle. I remember way back in the early 2000s, it was a real boom cycle. A teacher attended one of our events. She came to see us in the office. We were much more diligent than most other people that I know, still to this day. We would do a financial appraisal before advising. We did the financial appraisal and we advised this young lady not to buy because she didn't have the funds available. She was in tears. and she felt she was missing out. Now, I don't know whether she went on to buy somewhere else. And what I mentioned earlier on today is I think each individual needs to assess their own risk appetite, as well as their capital adequacy. And when Haroon and I started our business trading off plan, we had salaries and good bonuses. So we put all our working capital at risk, knowing in 2 years' time we could replenish it. That's not normal. So every individual needs to look at it. But I've always said every property is a good investment. It just depends on the investor and their investment horizon. Yeah. So a property with a 4% rental return will be a good investment for someone who thinks 4% safe and secure for 10 years is good. Whereas something giving 10% but with void periods and management will not be good. So it all depends on the individual and their assessment. And I think it's really important for people to understand that. But we're in the middle of a cycle. There's a real opportunity to buy well and hold on and sell when the market's going up or towards the up cycle. But again, it's understanding your own personal preference and appetite.
And do you think, so your sense is that the rates are going to come down after about 12 to 18 months?
That's right.
And I guess, you can kind of see the early signs of that thaw happening. And we're seeing, my sense from the people in the property market is that there's, particularly in, I think, the commercial space, they were saying that there's quite a lot of deals on, but like everywhere they're seeing stuff that's coming onto market that they weren't historically seeing. How long is that phase, do you think this is going to last? Like 6 months, 12 months? And when is the...
I think the way the UK has managed the economy and managed itself from the crash in the sort of late 90s and the way, in the early 2000s, the largest landlord in Brighton was one of the banks because they repossessed so many properties. Wow. So they learned from that and didn't repossess so much in 2008, 2009. And they're learning from that again, where repossessions are much, much slower. So the same sort of run around to buy and repossess is less so. So the opportunities will trickle onto the market, firstly on the residential side when fixed rates come to an end and rates jump, where people are forced to sell and forced to sell quickly. So you need to keep close to the market. And on the commercial side, again, it's just sticking close to the market to see when opportunities come. But I would suggest that trickle will increase over the next 6 months and start decreasing after that to sort of a normal market in 18 months or so. Brilliant.
Kamran, it's been a pleasure. I've learned a lot, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners will have learned from your wise words and lessons. Inshallah, we want to get you back on when Gridizen has conquered the Middle East. Inshallah. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.